Hello everyone, welcome to the advanced tutorial for the 2025 ATSSB audition etude for snare drum. This is the year E, which is the Cerrone etude number 42, but only a certain cut of that etude that we're going to cover in here. Now, I covered all of every single measure in the previous video, the Learn the Music tutorial. I broke down every single measure, every single beat, how to count it, how to play it in a basic format. So hopefully, before you even start here, you have been able to get all the way through the etude without any mistakes, or at least knowing how to count everything else. What I'm going to do in this video is talk about the upper level nuances for technique, for sticking, for different type of roll bases and sound qualities that you need to get if you really want to excel, or if you want to make all state, or really want to dig in and get the most out of this etude. So let's talk about first the drum that you play on, the sticks that you use. All right, I'm going to pepper this. I'm not going to go on a long tangent on everything you need to do to prepare for the audition, but I will say that whatever drum you decide to play with, I've got a Pearl Philharmonic. I just love the snare drum. I love the deep sound that it gets. You don't have to have a deep shell snare drum. You could have a small drum or thinner shell. I would really avoid getting a piccolo snare or something that's really high in pitch, because we really want to hear that meat out of all of your playing techniques. All right, the sticks that you play with are really important. You really should have a pair of sticks that has a good amount of weight to the front end to get a big body of sound out of the drum. You can play with SD1 Generals, you can play with different kinds of concert sticks, but make sure that it has something that produces a pretty meaty tone out of the drum. You really want to pay attention to the sticks that you use, that they're matched in pitch and matched in weight. Okay? It kind of goes without saying that you should have a great pair of sticks, because if your sticks are not matched, then you're going to have a really hard time playing evenly and smoothly from right to left hand. All right? What I would really recommend is pick your drum, get the tuning of your drum, even though you're just working on the etude at the very beginning of the year and you've got a lot of time. Pick your sticks, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that it is as consistent as possible all the way through your practice sessions. All right? I really recommend that you get on a drum as much as possible. All right? A practice pad is great, but you're never really going to hear the nuances of sound quality that you are with a real snare drum. So get on a snare drum, even though it annoys the parents, annoys everybody. If you've got the etude down, really it's about getting very, very critical of yourself and your listening, so that you can fix any very, very minute mistakes as you're playing. And you probably can't do that on a practice pad nearly as well as you could on a snare drum. All right, enough kicking a dead horse. Let's talk about that first measure, and I'm going to show you line by line. We're going to play all the way through it, or show you the whole etude. You should have a copy of the book, the Cerrone Portraits and Rhythm book, to make sure that you have the original copy. Don't be just trying to get it for free off of the internet. We really want to make sure that the publisher and the author receives his due royalties for that. All right, so on here, in my first video, I talked about the tempo and the roll base of any time that you have the slash rolls, it being a 30-second note, basically subdivision. So if I played that first line without the buzzes, a 30-second note subdivision would sound like this. So the hands are pretty even, and my right hand is guiding all the way through that. My right hand stays on every beat. Bigga digga dop, digga 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 dop, digga digga dop, digga 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 dop. All right. So my right hand is that tempo, and that works out really well. I've got a pair of headphones in. I'm going to put the metronome on 96. I'm going to put the subdivision on 8th notes. And you can play that measure with me with the 32nd note subdivision of the roll. 1 and 2 and ready and go. All right, and that works out fine. All right, it's a good sound. We really want to make sure that you're listening to the quality of sound of your bounces. I'm really kind of using a little bit more fulcrum pressure on my buzzes, and I'm really pressing into my buzzes to get as much of a meaty sound to my buzzes as possible. All right, now here's something that you might consider if you're an advanced player. And I like to always think about the quality of sound of my rolls as I play any etude. Now this etude is at 96 beats a minute. It's actually 48, but I'm going to double the tempo, 96 if I'm beating time to the 8th note. That winds up being a little bit slow for a roll bass if I play just the half note roll in the second measure. Okay, you can make a pretty good quality of sound out of that, but I still hear that ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I hear that subdivision. So what I like to do is, whenever possible, I like to use a different roll bass than just your basic Duple subdivision. So consider this. I'm not going to tell you how to play. I'm just going to give you options and let you open your mind up to the different types of techniques that you can use or to consider as you're playing. So in that first measure, in the first 2 beats, I can play it with a 32nd note subdivision. But I hear ba-da-da on my buzz rolls. I want to try it with a 7-stroke roll. So I'm going to go 1 E and a 2, and then I'm going to play a triplet on the roll. Okay, so 1 E and a 2, triplet starts on the left hand, big-a-da-ba-da-da-da-da, big-a-da-ba. Now that's going to be a little bit fast, but it's going to make my rolls sound really, really smooth. All right, listen to the original Duple subdivision, which might be fine. Now listen to the triple subdivision. All right, so use your ear, maybe stop the video, play that a couple of times with that triplet subdivision and see what you think. Maybe have somebody else listen to you to see which rolls they like better. Because I really want to make sure that my rolls all the way through the etude sound as full and as good as possible. So if you want to practice that, first 2 beats, without the bounces, you can practice it with just that triplet subdivision of the roll, and then put the bounces in. All right, I think you might wind up liking that. Now, for the second half of the measure, beat it up, beat it up. You have a lot of those in a row. A lot of those rolls in a row. Get it? You could put the triplet subdivision here, but I don't think it's really worth it on this one. Okay, having to finesse those doubles after a triplet with that much, I wouldn't really recommend it. So the way I would recommend playing that first measure is just with the triplet subdivision in the first 2 beats, and then go back to your Duple subdivision in the last 2 beats. All right, so you want to make sure that you're working with a metronome. Put it on 96, or you can put it on 48 with a 16th note subdivision, or 96 with a Duple subdivision, and play that first measure with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Two, again, and go. So you really want to analyze your sound. Be very critical of your listening as you work through this etude. Now, another thing that I will repeat over and over concept is that what we are doing through this rehearsal and working on a measure over and over is not just understanding it and being able to play it once. We want to work on it enough times to where our muscles and the tension or the fulcrum pressure and all of the things that we are able to do get ingrained, what we call muscle memory. We want to make sure that our muscles can play that measure no matter whether you're nervous or it's raining outside or somebody kicked over your snare drum on the way in the room. Any of those things, you're going to be able to nail it because your muscles have the memory to be able to do it. So I guarantee if you spend a lot of time, even if you feel like you really have it down, the more times that you just repetitiously work through a measure, the better you're going to get at it, the better your critical listening skills are going to be. All right, let's go on. All right, I'm not going to go into that much depth on every single measure, but in measure 2, again, if we're just thinking of a 30-second note subdivision, I'm thinking 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. With the sforzando, the diminuendo, the crescendo. Now I talked about going towards the edge of the drum and back, right? This is the only time that you actually play piano. So going towards the edge, make sure that you don't go so far towards the edge that you start getting a very thin sound. So you might want to just practice it with that 30-second note subdivision going to, I'm using a Remo head, so I'm just going to where the Remo is and then I'm coming right back to the center. And I want to make sure that it's like a volume knob, that I'm slowly turning down and slowly turning back, evenly turning up and down. So no jumps in the volume. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, how much accent that you place on the beginning, sforzando. Anytime I have a sforzando, I think of a big, heavy accent, not just a pinpointed accent, but a heavy accent. So I'm going to put a lot of weight into that first note, or first accented sforzando. As I play the piano, I want a little bit of an accent. I don't need to overly play that accent. I just want to make sure that it has a little bit of weight before I crescendo. Now, if you're using the 30-second note subdivision, then it's pretty simple. You just have to practice with a metronome, get your hands in tempo, don't rush. Try it with the buzzes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is where I really would encourage you to not use a roll bass. All right. What I like to do on longer rolls like this is not necessarily think about a subdivision, but think about the best quality of sound. So I'm going to use a little bit faster of a roll bass at the top of my dynamic. I might slow down my roll bass just a little bit at the bottom of the dynamic, and then as I crescendo, I speed that roll bass back up, right? That to me creates the smoothest sound possible. Now, it's not easy because you have to really, no matter what your hands are playing, your hands are just playing, but I'm having to think of that that subdivision of the metronome. So this is one of those things that you just practice a million times with a metronome, really critically listening to the quality of your roll. So let me demonstrate it first. So you're going to see my hands not in a 30-second note subdivision. You're going to see them kind of move fast, move slow, move fast again. See how it works. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right. Kind of hard because you're not really playing an exact subdivision. Now you can subdivide it out. You can play quintuplets all the way through this, all the way back down and up. So you think of if you really want to subdivide it out to where it's exact every single time. But I like the motion of playing a lot faster at the beginning of the roll and then slowing down my roll a little bit as I get to the bottom, okay? Playing that nice accent at the bottom and then speeding up a little bit as I get to the top, all right? But you really have to practice that with a metronome because you need to get used to it, teach your hands how to do it every single time perfectly. All right, let's play that whole first line. I'm going to use my triplet subdivision of my rolls in the first 2 beats of the first measure, and then I'm going to use my no subdivision in the last measure. You're certainly welcome to play 32nd note subdivision if you'd like. And 1 and 2 and ready and go. All right, so I guarantee you, if you take some time and really, really practice that, not just understand it, but do it over and over and over, the more that you play it, especially along with a metronome, especially on a snare drum, you are going to get better and better at your critical listening skills. All right, that is the paramount important if you want to make all-state, if you want to become a really, really great percussionist. It's all about developing your ears and your critical listening skills to where you can hear any nuance that's maybe not perfect. All right, let's move on to our next line. So in that first measure, I talked about a couple of different sticking options in the tutorial video on how to play the piece. So we already know that the dotted 16th, 32nd note, we have to make sure that we're subdividing, that we are thinking of those digga, 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 dot. All right, so be careful, 2 different things, that you don't round it out. And then you don't overly snap it, okay? Overly meaning that you're not actually playing a 32nd note, but somewhere closer to a double dotted 16th, 64th note. All right, some people will do that just to emphasize the interpretation, but we want to try to make it as rhythmically accurate as possible. So if you're a pretty good drummer and you can play that accent pattern, boom, ga-dong, 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 ga-da-da-da-dong, ga-dong, ga-dong, ga-dong. If you can play it with those inner beats in there, just to get used to hearing that exact subdivision, that's great, right? I'll do that a couple of times just so you can hear that subdivision. 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. All right, so you really have to get that triplet 3 when you get to that triplet, that you have to pull that back. Now, what we talked about is a couple of sticking options, and you should decide based off of your playing abilities on the flam, how you're going to approach the flam. Now, I discussed how I like keeping my right hand on every downbeat and playing my flam left, right, left, right, left, right, but you could also play it right, 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 right. You could also play it right, left, right, left. All right, so whatever sticking that you choose to use, you need to make sure that you notate it out, you write it in your music, and you do it every single time the same way. I should say the correct way. There is no correct way. You have to make those decisions, and you have to do it the same way every single time, so you're teaching your muscles how to do it properly. Now, a couple of things on this. When you're playing those first two beats, I want to make sure that today, 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 today is very consistent with the rhythm. Talked about the subdivision. But we also want to make sure that the flam sounds really good and consistent. So the flam doesn't open up. All right, I want to make sure it's a nice tight flam. I also don't want to pop it. All right, and I want to make sure that it's consistent, so one of them's not open and one of them's too tight. All right, so the other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is, if you're using an alternating sticking on your flam, left, right, or right, left, that the downbeat, that you whip a little bit for that downbeat. So if I play a left-right sticking, that's what my right hand is going to be doing, because I want that grace note very low. So if that's the sticking you're going to use, I really recommend that you just make that an exercise. That's just something that you do every single day, and you get used to that little whip that happens between your grace note and your primary stroke. And you do that a million times, all right? Because you want to make sure that once you get to that measure, which is one of the hard measures in the whole piece, that it is perfect every single time. Now, as you're playing, if you decide to use right, a flam tap, it's a great sticking to use because my ta-tam, ta-tam, ta-tam is nice and full with my good double stroke. I can regulate the spacing of my left hand very easily. I can make sure that my grace note is always down here and I don't have to worry too much. I would caution you that if you're using that sticking, make sure that you're not playing loud medium, all right? In fact, if you can use just a little bit of pop or a little bit of whip, either with your fingers or your wrist, to get that second note to come out, all right, that's even better, because we want it to feel bum, today, 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 to triplet day, today, today, today. We want to feel that boom, ba-dum, not dum, da-da, 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 all right? One other consideration, if you're using that sticking of your right on your flam tap, maybe consider doing that sticking all the way through for your dotted 16th 32nd. That's something that is not very normal. Okay, whenever we see that dotted 16th 32nd, we're always thinking. But if you're changing your sticking to a double, it's going to be a little more legato when you get to it. So why not make it exactly the same all the way through the measure? So I'm playing it slowly. I could do that sticking. So if I just take out my left hand, my right hand is always playing the same thing. That's an option. All right. The other option in that measure is you're sticking on your triplet. Okay. I like to play as much as I can with an alternating sticking. But when I get to that triplet, dot, 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 if I want to return to my right hand lead, I have to play left, right. Right, left, left, right. Now, if you're doing that right sticking, then you just play right. All right? So, the Important thing is that you stop the video, you work on that measure, be with a really open mind for what sticking sounds the best. If I were teaching you, I would know what your hands are capable of, and I would say, you know what, for you, let's do this sticking. But you may have to make that decision all your own. But what you need to do is try out everything and see what works the best, and then boom, make that decision. That decision is set in stone for the entire rest of the year until you do the audition. So you're teaching your muscles how to play it. All right, so I'm assuming that you've made some decision. Let's play that measure a couple of times. 1, 2, ready, and go. 1, 2, ready, and go. I know some instructors will hate me for even showing that sticking, but hey, it is an option. And since nobody's watching you while you audition, you're welcome to do anything that makes it sound as good as possible. All right, I'm going to play it with alternating sticking. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. One, 2, 3, and 4, and. All right, so whatever sounds best to you, do it every single time. In our second measure of this line, in my breakdown video, I talked about how you can practice it with the tied notes played on the rim. Right? I think even if you're an advanced player, that's a great way of just make sure that you have that in your head. 1, 2, 3, a triplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put the tied notes in. All right, so I can do that if you'd like, playing those tied notes in the air. 1, 2, ready, and go, and. Okay, that's a great way of being able to make sure that it's exactly perfect every single time. You can even play your foot on those notes that are in the air. And that really helps you to feel that downbeat where the tied note will be in that measure. Now, just make sure that on that triplet that you're really pulling back the tempo. All right, triplet 2, work with a metronome so you don't rush that measure. The other way that you can interpret it is to have a little bit of syncopation. All right, I don't think it's idiomatic for this particular piece, but you can put a little bit of syncopation, a little agogic accent, if you know what that means. It's just a little bit of emphasis on those syncopated notes, which kind of makes it sound a little bit more funky. So if I'm thinking in the tempo, do ga do ga go 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 do ga do. All right, so that's really exaggerating it. I don't think you would ever want to exaggerate it that much, but you can also practice that singing it with a metronome. Do ga do ga do go go ga da go ga do ga do go ga da. All right, and this goes back to another thing that I say all the time is that if you can sing it and you have that sound in your head, do da, but do da. Notice I'm having those long syllables. That's going to help me help my muscles to be relaxed. Do da, but do ba boo do ba but da is a very legato sound. That's what I want to make happen on the snare drum. So not too much tension. All right, so let's try to play that whole second line. I'll do it with the metronome. You can use whichever sticking you would like to on your flams, just has to be perfect. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I really like to just fake that note just so I have that in my head. Keeps me in time, keeps me from rushing. All right, so that first measure of that line is one of those, this whole etude is not really that hard, but it is one of those things that you have to do a million times until you can play it in your sleep, all right? Or you can read a book while you play that, or have a conversation and your muscles know it so well that they're performing it without any mistakes 100% of the time. All right, let's move on to the next line. Now, this one I really broke down with the tied notes being out on the rim. All right, you can go back through and do that. That's always fun to do, but it's also something that really reinforces that evenness of stroke. The other thing I like to do is just set my metronome with a triplet subdivision and sing it. Da 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 ba ba da ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da ba da. All right. Now, I like to practice just the first measure and a half and then leave that second half for not having that triplet subdivision in there. But if you'll think of triple, triplet, pollet, pollet, triplet, pum, if you'll think of that really lopey sound, with that nice relaxed motion of your hands, nice relaxed feel in your hands, so you're not really working too hard, then all of those notes are going to come out nice and smooth and even. So a completely different sound than so. Work with a metronome, sing it, and then you will be able to play it. All right, so practicing that, putting in your stickings. If you wanted to do the fake hands in the air tied notes, you're certainly welcome to do that. All right. That's a great way of just making sure that everything is exactly in time and that you're not rushing. In that second measure, the sticking that you use is completely up to you. You can go right, you can go, I like that left, left, right, and I'm doing that because I end up on my left hand. So I have that cha-da, do cha-da, do cha-da, do, all the way through those first two measure and a half. Then when I get to the second half of the second measure, I have to go back to my duple subdivision. So with your eighth note subdivision, that ga-da, 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 ga-da. So you have to think of it with a little bit more of a staccato interpretation. Boom, ga-doom, ga-da, 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 which is different than check it, do, check it, do, check it, do, check it, do. So I really encourage you to sing with that nice legato sound for your triplets. Triplet, pollet, pollet, triplet, triplet, two. Pa-ta-pa-poo, triplet, triplet. And then when you get to your dotted 16th, 32nd notes, change to more of a staccato dot, ga-da, 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 and then sing it. Then you can play it. All right? Let's try that whole line. Nothing really too terribly hard with it. 1, 2, ready, and to go. All right, so we really want that great subdivision and at the end of the line. All right, don't over-interpret it and play flams, okay? I want to make sure that it has that sound to it, bum, ba-dum, 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 not open flams or anything else, and you definitely don't want to slur it. Okay, So really work hard on getting that interpretation in that right hand lead. All right, now the next line, line number 4, is another one of the hard lines, one that I would definitely pick up if you were auditioning, something that you definitely need to be able to play. So in the tutorial video, I talked about the 32nd note subdivision in that first beat. Okay, which makes a good sound. All right, you can choose to play a little bit faster subdivision, and I love to play odd meter subdivisions to make my rolls sound really good. So it doesn't sound ba-ba-da-ba-da-da-da-da-da. I don't hear that right, left subdivision. I'm going to try to play a 5-lit, okay, a quintuple on that roll. So if I think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, opportunity 1, however you use your 5s. So I can put my subdivision here just on my quarter note, all right, at 96. So I have to get used to playing those 5s in time. All right, already sounds a little funky, but when I put my roll into it, you can really hear how the roll sounds nice and smooth. Okay, I don't hear any subdivision of that roll. Love quintuplet, seven tuplet, whatever that is. I love using odd beats, meters to my roll, because you don't hear that heavy right hand. All right, if you choose to play that as a 5-lit, like I just played, what I would do is first take out the left hand 64th notes and just work with a metronome. All right, might take just a little bit to get it exactly perfect so your hands know the speed that you're playing on that 5, then practice it with the roll. Now, if you do that, if I start my roll on my right hand, it ends with my left, I have to go left, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right in the next beat. Which is not really that hard, but you really want to think about that right hand being consistent after the 5. And then you put your left hand in. So if that's a great subdivision, if you really want to do it, you're really going to have to spend some time working it out. I think that the work on it will pay off in the long run, right? It's completely different than most people who audition are going to do. So you really want to work on the second half of that measure. Okay, especially getting that roll, working with a metronome to make sure that your 5 is in time and that you have a very distinct rhythmic interpretation of your dotted 32nd 64th notes. All right, so work through that measure, take it slow until you can play it perfectly with a metronome, gradually speed it up, but always have a critical ear listening to yourself playing that measure. All right, then we get to the hard measure, the last measure of this line, the second measure of this line. So we talked about a couple of different sticking options on the triplet, or the 4-stroke ruff. So you can use that single sticking, or you can use a right, left, left sticking. Or you can use a right, right, left sticking. All right, any one that you choose to do, we need to get really good at it, first of all, and we need to make sure that we're working on our interpretation. So with any concert piece, the drag at the beginning is going to be played as a buzz, not an open. You can do an open, but you really want it to be a very snapped version of the drag. Not a rudimental version where the bigger really comes out, but a very snap version. All right, so practice that. That was with doubles. It's so close in there that you really can't tell, or you can play it with buzzes. Now, figuring out your sticking there, I like to go right, 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 all the way through it, okay? I can use a little bit of a big motion with my arm. And that keeps my right hand in tempo. Then when I get to my 4-stroke ruff, what I want to do is, instead of putting it right on the and, I want to leave a little bit of space and push it towards the primary stroke. So here is an exact subdivision. Ba, bigga da ba, ba, bigga da ba. You hear that where the subdivision exact. Now I can open that up a little bit, open up the space. Ba, blia, ba, blia, ba, blia. So there's a big gap between the first eighth note and the accent. All right, that's using my alternated sticking, which I like. All right, in some cases, I kind of polled a whole bunch of percussion teachers, and that is a little too articulate for most people. Okay, depends on whether you like that articulation. But if you want more of a legato sound, then maybe playing that. Playing that right, left, left interpretation is going to be better. All right. This is where, if you're taking lessons, I really trust your teacher to tell you which one is going to be best for you. But if you're doing this on your own, you really need to spend some time all right, that takes a lot of speed and dexterity and whipping of the stick. So maybe that right, left, left sticking would be great. One thing I would like to do is work on it to where I think about the first two measures, or the first two beats of it. But I want to take my left hand out of that. If I'm choosing that right, left, left sticking, I'm going to take my left hand out. So I'm thinking, okay, so I have that soft loud, ba-bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, because you're going to need to play that first right hand in the grace note low, and then you're going to need to whip for the accent. So that's a great way of practicing that, to where you're also getting the interpretation of where that triplet of the 4-stroke ruff starts. And then you just fill in the left hands. Okay, so you can take that much slower. And until you get really comfortable with that, but gradually speed it up. You're going to need to be able to nail this 100% of the time, because this is the measure that's going to make it or break it for anybody trying out. All right? So really work on the first 2 beats of that measure. And then do the same thing for the last 2 beats of the measure. Okay, and trying to get that 4-stroke ruff perfect every time, then put the whole measure together. Until you can play that 100% of the time. Now you might have noticed that I'm putting a little bit of emphasis on the beginning of my 5-stroke roll, and I'm playing these as 5-stroke rolls, not as triplet bass rolls, in the second half of the measure. Okay, you don't have to do that too much. I like it a little bit because that helps define where the beat is. I always like to sing it a bunch of times with a metronome, and that informs what my hands are going to do when I actually go to play that and to practice it. All right, so practice that line again 1,000,000 times, especially that measure. All right, you want to be able to nail this line 10 times out of 10 times, even cold, because this will be part of the audition. Has to be part of the audition. Surely nobody's going to want to not have the hardest measure in this. All right, when we get to our next line, this is where it gets pretty simple. There's nothing hard about this in that first measure. If I think about my time here. All right, I really want to think about snapping those drags. And then every time I have my 30-second notes, I want to be nice and fluid and relaxed. I want to get a legato sound. I don't want any tension in my hands, and I want to listen to the evenness of the strokes from the right to the left hand. This is where you have to have a great pair of sticks. Now, I talked about in a tutorial video of all of my 16th notes are on my right hand. Boop bop 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 bigga digga doop bop 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 bigga digga dup dees up. All right, to keep that stroke really even all the way through. So if you listen to me play that. All right, then when I get to the end, I can choose to play a 5-stroke roll. All right, which sounds great. Or I can choose to play a 7-stroke roll, starting on the left hand each time. All right, it all depends on what sounds best to you. You just got to make sure that it's nice and clean and with the metronome. I like the 7s because I think the roll sounds fuller and it doesn't quite have that 16th subdivision or 32nd subdivision to it. So I don't hear that ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da. Kind of sounds like a hokey rudimental solo for a beginner. So a little bit more meat to the roll, and it also keeps me in time a little bit better. You're just going to make sure pekka pekka pa is nice and relaxed all the way through. All right, that is not a hard line to do, but we want to make sure that each one of our drags really have that snap, have the accent. Don't overplay your accents. There's no real reason to use a really, really loud accent. You want the weight of your forearm, but you don't want to overplay the drum. Now, if you are playing the 7-stroke rolls, I just remembered that I wanted to cover this too. If you're playing those 7-stroke rolls, you really are going to use a lot of fulcrum pressure, and you're going to think of the pressure being in the front of your grip. Okay? If you're pulling your fulcrum back right here, You're going to have a little bit harder time getting those rolls in time and the speed of those triplets. It's pretty fast for a roll, so you have to use a lot of fulcrum pressure to get that in there. Then we get to our last line. It's kind of the same choices. You can play it with a 32nd note subdivision. All right, you really need to, if you're playing that, you really have to dig into those bounces to make sure. Okay, produces a really good full sound. All right, which you might not hear that much of a subdivision of the roll from the microphone or across the room, but you can also play that with a triplet subdivision. All right, some people might think I'm crazy, but it is an option. Everything's an option. What you don't want to do is just simply play the etude a lot faster than what it's supposed to be. So keep that tempo at 48 or 96, however you want to work on it. Don't speed it up to 100, 120 or something like that just because you can. The difficulty is playing this in time in the tempo that it's supposed to go. All right, and then when you get to that last measure, you can play a triplet subdivision on the first 5-stroke roll, or you can play a 32nd note subdivision. All right, I like to emphasize a little bit of the right hand. But you can also emphasize the left hand and get a little bit more syncopation out of it. All right, that's just an interpretation thing. So make sure that whatever you do, that your buzzes sound great. Whether you're using a triplet subdivision on your 5-stroke or 7-stroke roll, but pretty much it's just a right, left, left, right. When you get to that last bit, you just want a great sound through the end. All right, so we went through everything a little bit at a time. I'm not going to play the whole etude for you. Actually, yeah, let me play the whole etude for you, just so you can have that sound in your head. I'm going to use all of those interpretations that I decided to do with the triplet bass roll, with the unbassed long roll, with the right, left, left, right sticking on the 4-stroke ruff, all of that stuff, just so you can see my interpretation. You may choose to do a different interpretation, but here's the way it sounds according to Mark Wessels, at least for today. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so practice that a bunch of times until you can nail it perfect every single time. Do not blow off the etude because it's really not that technically that difficult. There's a couple of little measures in here, but don't blow off even the easy stuff. You want to make sure that you have the mindset that I'm going to spend a good 5 minutes on each measure, right? Every day, every couple of days 5 minutes of just repeating that measure over and over is going to train your muscles how to play that exactly perfectly to where you can nail it 100% of the time. Because I guarantee you, whenever you get into a real audition situation, you're going to be a little nervous. Something's going to be in your mind, whether it's other people in the room that's not natural, whether it's having that the judges in front of you that have a curtain or however it is for your region. You're going to have all of these thoughts going through your head. So you need to make sure that your muscles are 100% correct, or that they can play it without really even thinking about it. All right? Then you can get over your nervousness. But you have to be able to play it 1,000,000 times perfectly in a row to get that one time that you actually have to play it perfectly. So good luck with it. Good luck with your audition. And hopefully I'll see you in another video down the road.